Pablo Suarez, who is the Associate Director for Research and Innovation at the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, is going to share with us the way that he uses humor in his day-to-day workplace and in building teams and increasing collaboration and addressing all of the challenges and some of the frustrations that many of us feel on a day-to-day basis. And certainly when we're trying to work cross-sector in some very difficult scenarios, having some tools around using humor to bring us together and to build those relationships is probably a skill we could all learn to increase. So Pablo, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, friends. Let's see. Yes, you can see what I can see. Good. This is not a comedy routine or anything like that. I'm not here to make you laugh. I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm here to help you think of how humor can become a tool for our work. It has been helping me a lot, and I predict it can help you as well. To get you into the vibe, we spoke and we heard about interoperability and many other terms that connect tech with our serious work. We're going to see how you guys can deal with interoperability with something that I suspect you're familiar with. You must know the game of rock, paper, scissors, right? Can you all show me your rocks? You could go to jail by doing this gesture in some places where it means revolution or something like that. Can you show me your paper? Can you show me your scissors? In a moment, I will ask you to stand up, find a partner, and play a modified version of rock, paper, scissors. I will give you a countdown, 10, 9, 8, etc. You will find a partner and go with that partner back to back. If same row, it's easy. If different row, figure it out. And then you will play a collaborative version of rock, paper, scissors. In the normal rock, paper, scissors, you're trying to squash the scissors with the rock, or you're trying to cut the paper with your scissors. That's not what we're about. We're collaborative. So in this version, after you found a partner, when I say 10, 9, 8, etc., 3, 2, 1, go, you will turn around and make one of those gestures, and your goal is to match your partner. You cannot strategize. You cannot say, let's do this or that, yeah? You will stand up in silence, back to back, 3, 2, 1, go, make that gesture, one of those three. If you match, you high five, celebrate, and go back to back to back. If you don't match, cry or experience sadness and go back to back for the second round, which I will explain then. So, rules are clear. I start from 10. By the time I say 3, 2, 1, go, you should have a partner, match, and play, and try to match each other. Start, stand up, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, and 3, 2, 1, go. All right, back to back to back. Back to back to back for the second round. Allow me to comment that the statistical expected value of success should have been 1 in 3. It wasn't, yeah? Some of you didn't find a partner, some of you didn't turn around. Now you're going to do the right thing. You're going to turn around, and instead of doing a gesture, you're going to just say a word. No strategizing, no talking to your neighbor. You say one word loud and clear. Make sure that your partner hears it. Everyone else will be talking at the same time. So I will say 3, 2, 1, and you'll just say one word. Your goal is to match your partner. Yes? You both should try to say the same word. You cannot say the word humor. You're invited to say a word that you think you and your partner think of when you think about humor. I don't think you're thinking of like interoperability, so don't say that one either, okay? So when I say 3, 2, 1, go, say a word loud and clear that you associate with humor. If you match, high five, and then you can sit down. 3, 2, 1, go. All right. Sit down. Now, notice this room, yeah? It's very hard for me to recover your attention because you've bonded with your partners, your brains were very much at work. You were thinking, what's he or she or they going to say? Yeah, and then if you found the same, you discovered, can anyone scream the word that you matched if you did say the same word? Fun, what else? Laughter, what else? Funny, okay, here are some of the words that in playing this kind of activity many times, I've noticed that people tend to match with. Laughter, jokes, fun, stand-up, comics, etc. Did anybody say the word death? I kid you not, when I first played this game with Bob Mankoff, who is best known for his work as cartoonist and cartoon editor for 2 decades at the New Yorker magazine, we both turned around and he looked at me in the eye and said, death. And you laugh, but there's a deep scientific insight there. We'll get to that. So, it may look like we're living through normal times. And in a way, these are normal times if you acknowledge that a new normal looks a lot like what we used to call bad. It's bad, my friends. Things are changing. Many of those changes are predictable and scary. Other things are changing and we don't see it coming and it's scary. And other things like technology can help us deal with the scary stuff, but we don't know how to deal with it because no one's listening, no one's doing the right thing. And those who are struggling and are feeling darkness. I used to be a full-time researcher, math geek, system dynamics modeler. I used to use the language of mathematics to understand and address change, mostly on climate risks. So please forgive me as I walk you through this cartoon by Bob Mankoff with my mathematical lens. We know from system dynamics models that change, when it sometimes happens kind of gradually until it happens abruptly. Yes? Now, I've deployed some variables here. H here stands for hell. How horrible can it get once change becomes more abrupt, as we know it could? The letter D stands for denial. Do we dare recognize that some things are coming close, and we know they may happen, an earthquake in Puerto Rico, changes in the legislation on what we can and cannot do, technological developments. And many other variables that I will spare for my full version I was so happy with all the geekiness, but here's an important signal, an important character. Question mark, what the hell were those people thinking when they put themselves in that place? Why are we socially constructing risk? And if you think about the things that we are collectively doing, almost all of them are doing something that is potentially good for the short term, but setting us into trouble for what is likely to come. So this is one of those cartoons by Bob Mankoff that helped me understand the world. This is a very powerful explanatory theory of my job. It is my job to help humanitarians and policymakers and scientists and others to understand what can go wrong and what can be done about it. And almost always the solutions are within reach, except that we don't do the right thing. The actual caption that Bob Mankoff gave to this is, Brad, we've got to talk. And guess what? We don't often talk about the things that could go wrong and what could be done about it. This is, thank you for your laughter. I am in December going to go to the UN Climate Conference, which will be held in Santiago, Chile. It will be my 17th consecutive climate conference. 10,000 people or so, 200 countries, starts one Monday, through the weekend, the other Friday. This is what it looks like. How much humor do you see in that room? Near none. What do you think are the chances that this group of people spending the time in this way will radically transform the way we work together and find solutions to one of the most complex problems we're confronting as humans? Right? If you could design a process intended to guarantee that we make no progress, it would look a lot like this. Now, when I presented this session on humor to the organizers of this event. And it's a UN system, so they can do only what nations give them the permission to do. So it's not UN's fault. It's countries that want to do the same thing. Minister wants to speak the speech and so on. It's complicated. But one of my colleagues walked to the screen and pointed to this fellow. Exactly. That's exactly how it feels to be in the time and place where problems are being discussed in order to solve them, and when you can tell very reliably that it won't work. Speaking of it won't work, you guys are mostly technologically inclined, so I'm going to share a story, something that happened to me in one of these events. My computer wasn't connecting to the internet, so I walk up to the IT desk. Two young, very kind, technically competent people start pushing buttons to fix my problem. And then, this was in Warsaw, one of them looks at the other while pointing at their own computer, says something in Polish, a language I don't understand, and they both have a good laugh. I thought, well, nothing else to do. I'm waiting. They look like nice guys, so may I ask what is humorous? And one of them says, yes, a PowerPoint just started in room 17. To which I'm thinking, how do you know, and why is that humorous? And he could interpret my facial expression and said, we can see a peak in internet usage. Do you notice the pattern? Some of you got it, others got it later, others still are trying to get it. It's catastrophic. IT folks at a conference noticed that when the designed intervention begins, people get so bored that they tune out and start checking email and downloading files and so on. Most of you went through the same thing that happened to me, which was first to laugh because it's funny, and then to go like, no, the same like that guy. What are we doing when we design time together? I have to be very candid. As a scientist turned humanitarian worker, I feel an amount of darkness that I'm not used to experiencing. And I see it all across my colleagues. And there are two works of art, if you allow me to call literature and painting art. It's much more diverse than that. But we have been creating things that we didn't care for them well enough, whether it's the UN system or the internal combustion engines. And we have been creating monsters. And things are happening that makes us want to scream. Yeah? It sometimes feels like Munch. And one of the things that I'm working on now, even though I don't have any competence, but I'm finding people who know these things, and if you know, please walk up to me, is how to address this darkness, this anxiety, this concern that is becoming more and more prevalent when we have to do stuff that needs to be done and we don't have enough time, money, understanding, partnerships. So working with humanitarian workers, communities at risk themselves, researchers, journalists, youth, it's bad. And what I'm noticing is that if I don't bring light, illumination to this darkening process, I won't be able to work at the rate, at the intensity, with the passion, with the love that is needed for this. Now, when I talk about humor, I don't want you to think of jokes. Jokes are one manifestation of humor, but jokes are statements that are uttered with the intention to provoke laughter. And when you try to provoke laughter, chances are that for some people you will fall flat and it will be bland and stupid, and to others you will offend. This depiction by Ross Chast is an illustration of how sometimes humor comes across. It's the wrong lightness in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is not what I'm going to share with you. Even though I celebrate those who are good at telling jokes and who can find the right balance and so on, I'm not proposing that because that can go wrong. If you can do it, I'm proposing other things. And let me start with some things I found. I became a student of humor. It turns out that humor is a fascinatingly complex, difficult to understand thing. And there are some researchers that have investigated how social movements have tapped on the social power of humor. Mr. Gandhi, turns out, was a tactical and strategic user of humor. One example, a journalist told him when he was about to meet the king of the empire that was oppressing his land, "Mr. Gandhi, do you think you're properly dressed to meet the king?" And he responded, "Do not worry about my clothes. The king has enough clothes on for both of us." You notice how it's a humorous remark, but it's intended not to provoke laughter, but to shed light on something that is important and under-addressed. Martin Luther King also was a very good tactical user of humor. Once he was with his fellow activists from one place to another, and he suggested to stop to get food, so that if they went to jail, at least they got to jail with a full tummy. That was shedding light on an uncomfortable truth that needed to be acknowledged. If you're part of this, you may go to jail. We may get into trouble. I'm going to share with you 4 anecdotes, if you want, of the things that with my team, the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and partners have been doing. Very different, and some of them kind of humor happened not by design, and then we started making it happen more intentionally. This is a workshop on the Zambezi River floodplain on the Caprivi Strip. Floodplain, so floods can happen. Before it happens, it's a good idea to know what to do. So on a sunny day without a flood, we had a workshop with subsistence farmers on what to do if a flood comes. And instead of doing the usual under a tree, we talk, and the men keep talking, then maybe the women eventually get given the chance to talk, we created a playful activity, essentially a game, where people were invited to actually do the things they said should be done. Imagine if here it was a workshop about fire hazard, and you say that you need to get to the fire extinguisher. We'll hide some dice in the fire extinguisher. You have 90 seconds to get to those dice, roll the numbers. When you get a 1, you bring the piece of paper and you accomplish the mission. Guess what? No one knows where the fire extinguisher is, right? So we had this activity, and you see the people were actually literally running. I have to confess, this is facing me, that is facing you, so I want to run this way, but you see the people running that way. So people are running, the body language is one of action, but look at their faces. There's joy. There's radiant smiles because they're having a good time. It turns out that they found the activity humorous. And neuroscience shows that when you're having a good time, your memories go deeper and are easier to recollect. By bonding, people trusted each other, their ideas, and the people who organized the workshop. Humor engenders trust. And if you want people to do something different, to change their systems, their software, their dialogues, their disaster preparedness measures, it turns out that you won't be able to change much unless you engender trust. I love this sentence, change happens at the speed of trust. Another one, very different context, yours truly at the White House. About 8 years ago, a workshop from morning to evening, many guests, 130 people in the room, 5-minute PowerPoints by different organizations. Hello, my name is so-and-so from this and that, and we did this thing, there was a problem, then we came, we gave a solution, now it's better, give us more money, thank you very much. Next presenter, hello, I'm this and this from that and that, and it became like a soup of PowerPoints, everything was becoming not very energetic, then lunch, then one presentation, then me. I knew I was going to receive an amoeba of an audience. So I said, hello, my name is Pablo, and this is not a frisbee, it's a hurricane. If it hits you in the chest, you're in trouble. Everyone stand up. We're like, what? So, of course, there was confusion. More people woke up and turned towards me because something was happening. I repeated those words. I invited everyone to stand up, and I threw some dice, 2 dice, and threw the frisbee in one of the directions. There was an arch of people, and it hit some people, and everyone was very confused. And I grabbed the frisbee and said, well, if the hurricane goes your way, you can avoid the trouble by sitting down, which is like evacuating, and it flies above your head, you're safe. But if you sit down to evacuate and the hurricane goes in another direction, someone will steal your refrigerator. So I throw the dice again, some numbers, I throw the frisbee, it hits people. People are very confused, but trying to figure out what's going on. Eventually, someone figures out the rule. Double 1, throw over here, double 6, throw over there, interpolate. I threw a 5 and a 3, someone said, an 8, it's going over there. They all sat down, I threw the frisbee, flew above their heads, hits the wall, yay, the room exploded in celebration. When the laughter and celebration dwindled, I said, congratulations, you figured how science can become early warning for early action to save lives. Now think Hurricane Katrina. We can help you do better. My name is Pablo from the Red Cross. Thank you very much. And thanks for your claps. But you understand, it took about 6 minutes. And people were awake, were connected. And look at the fellow presenter. Look at her smile. Yeah, there was humor in the air. Humor helps us to make what is strange can become familiar, like the science of figuring out an early warning system, and what is familiar, like people die in hurricanes, becomes strange. Why are we letting that happen? That's a very powerful tool when you can reframe what is and what could be. Next example. With one of my colleagues, Andrew Krukskiewicz, we were spending 4 days training the NASA disasters team and Surveyor on how to communicate science for saving lives, satellite images, models, and so on. The first session was held in a venue that had the aesthetics of a stand-up comedy club. Not by design. I arrived just in time. Andrew said, hey, we should take advantage of this. And he shared an idea which we concocted in real time. We are trained in improvisation, by the way. I advise that to anyone who's doing things that you don't know what's going to happen. And so we came up with an activity. This was going to be a time when different teams presented during 5 minutes what they're doing. Maybe 10 presentations. What do you expect will happen? Presenting team presents, most people fall asleep or don't care. Q&A, why didn't you use my method? I can show you my equations. Instead, what we did was, okay, presenters will present, each table, about 6 people per table. You are a news organization. Could be the New York Times, could be Fox News, could be a global Al Jazeera, something. Your job is to come up with 2 headlines. It could be in whatever means your news organization is. One of the headlines is, something awesome happened as a result of the tool that is about to be explained. And the other headline is, something problematic happened as a result of the tool. There were awesome headlines on how things could go wrong, which were crafted with a lot of humor in them. So 2 things happened. One is that when the presentation was being presented, everyone was listening to it because they wanted to come up with a way to react to it in a way that was witty, insightful, useful. And then when the headline was shared, the presenters had no choice but to accept that the volume of laughter was directly proportional to the extent to which the tool designers had not thought of something that could go wrong. Because if you show with the satellite something, well, maybe bad things will happen as a result. So it enabled people to have the difficult conversations about what can go wrong. Humor was not the result of a joke planned by us. It was enabling conditions for people to speak in a way that, through humor, allowed to say difficult things. Laughter can be the shortest distance between people and ideas that are not easy to confront. And one thing, I gave a TED talk on humor, and in the guidelines, I'm going to read this. From the official TED Guide to Public Speaking, audiences who laugh with you quickly come to like you. And if people like you, they're much readier to take seriously what you have to say. Now again, this is not about telling a joke before you start talking about your software interoperability awesomeness. This is about creating conditions that enable that discovery, that joy to emerge. Last example. I'm a math geek. I like geeky stuff. And we had in West Africa, in the Mono River shared by Benin and Togo, a situation where a hydropower dam was letting water go, people didn't know, people died, and we wanted to come up with an early warning system, but there wasn't good data or money to do the right thing in terms of hydrological modeling. I used to be a hydro modeler. So if you had a human looking at the little data we had, we couldn't come up with a model. We partnered with machine learning scientists. We came up with a way to, we call it FUNES, given how much is raining, how full the reservoir, what are the chances of flooding downstream? it's mostly like a 12-year-old could come up with something roughly equally good. If it's filling up and it's raining, maybe you should start running. But machine learning makes it sound cool, there's analytical rigor, and there was German money that was enabling the real innovation behind this, which was forecast-based financing. Can we move money to take early action before disaster, after signals of a potential disaster happening, so the extreme event doesn't become a disaster? A lot of talking, but imagine this. National and subnational government entities, Red Cross volunteers all the way to Geneva and Germany, hydropower dams, the meteorological, bringing those people together to agree to something weird was not easy. So we made it a point from the beginning to craft humor and art to enable the conversations to happen, for people to coexist with each other despite different priorities, different mandates, and so on. This is my first ever work of art. It's basically how much water in the river, January to December, dry season, wet season, dry season. Next year, dry season, wet season, dry season. Next year, 2007, dry season, wet season, dry season. That was a flood. What caused it? And we had some parameters, and this helped people become curious. There was even a fight between two government entities over who kept the object. It was shared at the Understanding Risk Conference convened by the World Bank and partners in Geneva. Now, as I was mounting this in a little room in the conference venue, the Arsenale, there was an Italian worker with a little cart, putting chairs on the cart, going away, and then coming back with an empty cart and filling the chairs as I was mounting this thing. And he was intrigued. And then he stopped and said, "Ma cos'è quello? What is that thing?" I explained, it's about an early warning system with machine learning in Togo in West Africa and with the Red Cross. He looked to make sure that his boss wasn't around and said, "Raccontami più, tell me more." What are the chances of an Italian conference venue worker risking getting fired to learn about a machine learning-enabled forecast-based financing tool for early action in West Africa? I say near zero, but because there was art and humor, he wanted to ask more. And that's exactly what had been happening throughout the design. This won a Global Innovation Award and so on. Humor awakens the appetite for learning, even at the expense of taking risks. If you look at the preceding sessions, there were moments where the speakers said something funny or did something that was interpreted as funny, or someone made it, and people get awakened. People want to know what's going on. So, what is humor? Next task for you. In 60 seconds or less, tell to your neighbor what you think humor is. You open a dictionary, what does it say? Ready? What is humor? Talk to your neighbor, 60 seconds. Ready, set, go. Ten seconds. And 3, 2, 1, stop and silence, please. So I didn't hear what you were saying, but I could read your facial expressions. Many of you were like, it's not easy. Some of you were comfortably talkative with your partner being, So let me tell you what the dictionary says. First of all, a good old-fashioned thick dictionary starts by saying that the etymology of the word comes from humor as fluid. If there's humor, there's flow. I already love it. We tend to not have much flow when we do our things. A shorter dictionary says, first, humor is a quality. It's an attribute. It's not a thing that you have. It's an attribute of something else. It's a quality of being amusing or comic or entertaining, depending on who you ask. Second definition, the ability to appreciate things, situations, or people that are comic. Yeah, you have a sense of humor. Third one, a state of mind. Are you in a good humor or not? We like people in a good humor. And even humor as a verb, humor me. Yeah, it's an interesting term. The first time that the research question, what is humor, was documented was 2 millennia ago. A certain Mr. Plato and a certain Mr. Aristotle, who wondered what made people laugh, being very smart people, they came up with the superiority theory. You fall over a banana peel, I laugh at you, I feel superior, it's awesome. That is the kind of theory that dominates stand-up comedy. I make fun at people from the other country, the other political party, the other province, the other soccer team, and we laugh together. Or I make fun of myself. I'm so tall that this thing doesn't fit in airplanes, and people laugh at the expense of others because in laughing they feel superior. We cannot do that. It gets very close to the completely unacceptable things that we fight, like gender imbalances and so on. Mr. Pascal, a mathematician, came up with the incongruity theory. Humor emerges when there's a disproportion, says Pascal, disproportion between what you expect and what you get. If I walked up here with a funny hat, you would not be expecting that. Some of you would find it funny. This theory I find too inclusive. If one of you comes and shoots at me, that would also be a mismatch, but it wouldn't be necessarily humorous. Do you recognize the person on the top right? Mr. Freud, the relief theory. Can you name a word that he's likely to have used? Are you that shy? What does Mr. Freud think, in addition to relief, that is connected to the existence of humor? Sex, of course! He postulated that humor is one of the things that we do when we want to unleash or relieve suppressed sexual thoughts and aggressive behavior. As an Argentinian male, I can attest to the validity of this theory when, as a young male, I was indoctrinated on how to take young women to bed by making remarks that were completely unacceptable, because the Argentinian male happened to be somewhat repressed on that front. Now, of course, I don't think we should embrace that theory of humor. We should not use humor to unleash violent thoughts, sexual or otherwise. The Humor Code is an interesting book for those of you who are curious, who shares a lot of theories and postulates very strongly a dominant theory of humor today, which is the benign violation theory. Humor happens when something is a little bit in violation of a norm, but it's benign, it doesn't hurt. If I tickle myself, too benign, I'm not gonna laugh. If it's my first day in jail and a giant dude comes to tickle me, maybe a little bit too trespassy, I'm unlikely to laugh. But if my mom tickles me when I'm 3, or a girl I like tickles me when I'm 14, then it's the right balance of benign violation. My favorite theory, in terms of its usefulness, is by Tom Veach, a fellow who, in addition to being a scholar, is into tools and things. Don't ask me why he posted that on his own website. He offers the N plus V theory, which is N for normalized and V for violation. So there's commonality with the previous one. I'm paraphrasing, but he says that humor emerges when there's a violation of a normative principle of how things should be, and yet that violation is perceived as normal. It's generally accepted. Think of the couple in the waterfall. It depicts how we are. We find it funny because we're constantly putting ourselves in risky situations. Last slide having to do with theory. This is my dear colleague and friend, Belina Raffi. She runs an entity called Sustainable Stand-Up, which harnesses the power of the tools of stand-up comedy, but for sustainability purposes, such as disaster management, environmental management, and so on. She says, love yourself, love your audience, find the system funny. So this is a stand-up comedy that is not about superiority theory and making people laugh about other people. It's about finding the system funny, and through humor, shedding light on what's wrong with the system. Now, my friend John Crowley, who, thank you very much, John, for bringing me here, like me, we're both system dynamics modeler. Check out this cartoon. The caption says, "Try honking again." Any of us who has been stuck in a traffic jam, you know that honking again will not lead to the flow you want, right? There's something wrong with the system ahead of them. And there's not much they can do to make that clogged system become unclogged. Maybe it requires a redesign of the system. Maybe it requires different roads, regulation of who drives what cars, etc. But what we're doing when we do what we do is often to not recognize the complexity of the system and the reasons why there is no flow, and instead we try honking again. We say to people, we need interoperability. Well, guess what? The reasons why there isn't interoperability is not because people don't know. It's because there are forces, incentive structures, and so on that are not technical in nature. This is my wagging my finger at you. I grew up in an Italian-speaking household. My grandma wagged her finger at me a lot, so now I pass it over to you. Tech people thinking humanitarian, etc. Our tech solutions are not working for non-technical reasons because people try honking again. What is it about the system that prevents us from having a conversation about what could work or not? Lovingly, let's recognize that the emergence of humor enables breakthroughs in recognition, in understanding, in learning, in dialogue. Once humor happens, it's easier to recognize that we're doing the same thing and it won't work. So, I'm going to put you to work again in a shortened version of an activity that we designed with Bob Mankoff for the World Bank Independent Evaluation Group. A little bit of background. World Bank has some money and gives some money, and those who take the money on behalf of governments are supposed to spend it for good things, for their people. Sometimes the people in those countries don't get engaged. So a hydropower dam happens, and maybe those who are going to be displaced were not even informed. So the World Bank was convening an event on citizen engagement, which is code for why aren't you engaging people, and government accountability, which is code for corruption. 150 people, mostly from developing countries, were going to convene, invited by their main donor to have a conversation about corruption. Now imagine you're the Minister of Infrastructure, a Minister of Planning, Minister of Finance, and someone says, would you like to come to my meeting about corruption? Actually, you have to come to my meeting about corruption. What will the minister say? There is no corruption in my country, and it wasn't me. And who do you think you are convening a meeting about corruption? The default would be a very defensive, fruitless event. So Brenda Barbour expressed her concerns about it, and I said, how about we engage Bob Mankoff, the cartoonist, who has an entity called Cartoon Collections, and we create an activity where humor enables difficult conversations. So you're going to experience a taste of that very soon. Just an image of how it looked like. We had some chosen cartoons against the wall, big poster size, about a dozen or more. And people were invited to walk about the room, stand next to the ones that they found most interesting, and have a conversation with some neighbor, and then annotate the cartoons with an alternative caption, with a reflection, with an insight, with a question. And guess what? It worked. Once you are standing with someone and you both laugh at the same thing, it's like you acknowledge that there's a reality there. Humor, like it was said about art, the lie that says the truth. Look at these two faces. There's intense looking and there's laughter. So what we're going to do is to give you a taste of this activity. I'm going to go through about 8 cartoons, and here's your task. First, look at those cartoons actively and try to find how those cartoons connect to your own work, to what you see in your work, to the actions you're doing or trying to do in your work, and to the hope that you're trying to bring to this world. When I've gone through them, I will show these tasks again. You will self-organize in trios or so, 2, 3, or 4 people, and you will have a brief conversation about which of those cartoons reflected something that matters, either something that you already had in your brain or soul, or something that you weren't thinking about. So, running through some cartoons. This one by Bob Mankoff, the most downloaded cartoon from the New Yorker magazine. No, Thursday's out. How about never? Is never good for you? Bob argues that the reason why this cartoon is successful is that it blends, it combines the language of diplomacy with the content of, I don't give a damn about you. How often do you encounter that kind of reaction when you're proposing what you're proposing? I don't think I need to elaborate with this audience. You will make the same foolish mistakes you have made before, not once, but many, many times again. This again connects very strongly to your work. Where does the evidence go once it's created, right? The Garden of Innovation, there's a person with a gentle smile carrying a young tree with a colorful fruit. Everyone around has tools meant to snip and chop it out. Stakeholders say, I love it, me too, referring to the mobile with little animals. What does the baby see? Not exactly the best sight. I sense the resonance. This should be at the beginning of any user testing session. This relates to a publication we launched recently with my team to echo a recent climate change publication by the IPCC about oceans. It may take a while to notice. It took me a while to notice what was going on. The caption is, that can't be good. And then you notice that the sun is not setting behind the horizon, but in the water. So we laugh, but we know that with climate change, not only the atmosphere is heating up, but the ocean's waters are becoming warmer. It's very hard to heat the ocean. And once you start heating the ocean, as we're doing, things are beginning to change dramatically. The health of coral reefs is going down. The energy available for strong hurricanes is changing. Many other things are expected to happen in the foreseeable future. Now, one other thing that I saw in a tweet, you know how these past months have been the hottest, like June was the hottest June in the recorded history of 130 years of data. July was the hottest month ever recorded in the 130 years of data. So there was a tweet, I can't remember who shared it, that said, oh, people, these pessimists, talking about this month as the hottest month in the past 130 years. I like to see the positive. I like to see this year, as this month, as the hottest month in the, I'm an optimist. I like to see the positive. I like to think of this month as the coolest month in the next 130 years. Right? And we laugh, and then we say, holy smokes. What does it mean for our risks, the risk of heat waves and so on? Escher, get your ass up here. Sorry, I'm only reading the cartoon. Why? For those of you familiar with the Dutch artist Escher, he was the creator of impossible objects. That triangle made by the steam beams cannot exist. Can you follow? Goes from here to there, then down, so it should be down, not in the same level, so it cannot work. In the cartoon it works, in the real world it cannot work. The construction worker says, hey, architect, what the hell? Do you recognize yourselves when you tell people, just use this software and everything will be all right? So I've shared a few cartoons. Your task now is in the next 4 minutes or less, find a duo or trio, speak about one of the cartoons that spoke to you. Be brief, be punchy, good luck. 2 minutes. And 20 seconds. And 3, 2, 1, stop and silence, please. Thank you for bringing your attention back. I know it's hard. So when I look at your faces, I see radiance, but I see an intelligent look. It's not like you were telling humorous anecdotes about your child learning to walk. There's something about your work that connects deeply to some of the insights brought forward by these humorous remarks. Indeed, the New Yorker magazine does not refer to cartoons as cartoons. They refer to as idea drawings, because they help craft ideas in the mind of the reader. There's one last cartoon I want to show you. We may think we know what people are thinking when they're thinking, but maybe they're thinking about other stuff. When you guys are thinking of IT solutions for humanitarian problems, maybe you think that their problem is not what they're thinking about. This will explain a lot about the incentive structure of the user community. I'm not saying that all of us humanitarians are thinking of becoming a marble kisser, but you know that the incentive structures are not always aligned with what would be good for the data, what would be good for the software, what would be good for the flow of information. You remember, these are the kinds of words that you thought of when I asked you, what do you think of when you think of humor? And I think you can agree with me that none of these words seem to relate to humanitarian work, or to conservation work, or to IT work, unless maybe you think that some of us are somewhat smart. There seems to be no overlap. Now, when you ask humorists like Bob Mankoff, what do you think of when you think of humor? These are the words that they bring to mind. They think of conflict, tension, incongruity, risk, questioning, danger, of course, death. This is what a humorist has in mind when they see the world. They notice the coexistence of what is but shouldn't be with the people who let that happen. And they make it obvious that it exists and it needs to be confronted. It is for that reason that I am finding humor so helpful. Because if I tell someone, my boss, my peers, the people I help, or some funder or some community, that something's wrong, the first instant perception is that I'm an arrogant jerk. Para los que hablan español saben cuánto más ayuda que soy argentino. Yes? Sorry, that's a Latin American humorous thing. In short, pointing to the wrong thing leads to the wrong outcomes, keeps us stuck. Humor enables flow. Why does humor work, in my opinion, in my experience, for risks? We spend a lot of our time in these events, in our time with partners, in our time with users, giving answers. But it turns out that they didn't have a question in the first place that is answered with our answer. And so half of the effort that we make goes into a non-listening brain. We're answering questions that are not being asked by our audience. The way humor works is that first it creates confusion. Deliberately, there's a contradiction, an ambiguity, a conflict, a tension. Something's wrong. And the brain is a puzzle-solving machine. It gets attracted to the sun setting inside the ocean, the try honking again, the perspective of the child seeing the rear end of those animals in the mobile. And then a question emerges, why am I being shown this? Why do I resonate? It makes me laugh because I see the connection, if it's well designed, it's the right audience, and so on. something creates an aha moment, a revelation, a getting it. A PowerPoint just started in room 17. You earn the right to laugh because you figure it out, you feel super heroic, and then you go, aha, now I understand how this connects to my real work. I should try to stop honking and change what's ahead. I should try to think from the perspective of the user before I design the mobile software that is not interoperable. This explains the way I see humor now. I'm still learning, I'm still evolving, I'm working with experts. There's people who know how to help you craft humor. There's a fellow called Drew Tarvin who has helped me a lot, who has an entity called Humor That Works. You hire him, and he helps you infuse humor into your work, whether you're the FBI or the IBM, two of his clients. Because it works. Think of marketing. Think of how many advertisements are infused with humor because they attract the mind. So we're going to make you work again. When I say so, you're going to stand up, find one partner, could be the one of the rock, paper, scissors, or another one, and you're going to have a very brief conversation. If you were my partner, thank you. One of us would say something that's wrong with our systems. For example, people don't use data. And you have no choice but to respond, no! And then one-up me with something that is even worse about our work. You could say, people use data but stupidly. And I could say, no! And one-up him and come up with a spiral of confrontation of what's the worst thing that's going on. Everyone stand up, find a partner. In 1 minute, what's wrong with this word? Say no to each other. And 3, 2, 1, stop and silence, please. Shh, thank you. Now stay standing. We're moving on to round 2. You can stick to your partner or change. Just make it quick. Second task. I'm going to change my partner. If we were partners, one of us would start with a solution that is being attempted now. For example, you could say, my team is enabling software interoperability through the platform, yada, yada. And the other person has no choice, has to respond, yes, but it almost never works, or whatever is a very short version of why that's meh. Yeah? And then say something else that is being done to solve problems, to which your answer will be what? Yes, but, and make it meh, and say something else and go back and forth with each other about a minute. Good luck to you. And 3, 2, 1, stop and silence, please. Shh, we move on to the last round. Thank you for your attention. This is going to be different. One of you is going to start with a new thing that could be done in your sector, in your company, in your work life, that hasn't been tried before, that brings humor to your work life. I'm not going to illustrate how, but you could say, I don't know, we could use that cartoon, or we could train people in jokes, or whatever you want. You say it clearly, briefly, tweet length, or whatever. I'm not much of a Twitterer. And the next person has no choice, has to say, listen attentively, and then say, yes, and has to build on that idea, either by enriching that idea, adding to that idea, giving texture, naming a partner. Keep it brief. The other person says what? Yes, and you build off each other in a spiral of awesomeness in 1 minute. Ready, set, go. And 3, 2, 1, and stop. Folks, I can tell your radiant smiles. Some of your ideas are nonsense. They're stupid. It's okay. It's your first idea. You have a week to keep trying. You have a week to keep exploring. This was the title. That's me. I'm so grateful to the organizers. Wishing you all the best with what awaits. Thank you. Thank you.